I never thought I'd be telling this story, but sometimes life takes such unexpected turns that you need to share your experience, if only to help others who might find themselves in a similar situation. My name is Janice, and I'm a 27-year-old web designer working remotely from home. I have a sister, Linda, who's 3 years older than me, and a nephew named Aiden, who just turned 6. 3 years ago, Linda went through a difficult divorce with her husband, Tom. It was messy and emotionally draining for everyone involved. Tom desperately wanted to take Aiden with him, and he fought hard for custody. But then his parents got seriously ill, requiring his immediate move to another state to care for them. With this complicated situation, the child had to stay with Linda, and Tom agreed to pay generous alimony to ensure Aiden would be well provided for. That's when everything started to change. Before the divorce, Aiden was just a regular 3-year-old boy. He went through the terrible threes like any other kid, nothing major, just the usual tantrums here and there. But after Tom left, Linda went through what she called her awakening. She started attending all these personal growth seminars, became a strict vegetarian, and discovered what she called spiritual retreats. I remember the first time she left him with me for a whole week. It was about 6 months after the divorce. "Linda, you can't just leave him for a week. He needs his mother," I protested. She just smiled that new, serene smile she'd picked up from her meditation groups. "He needs a mother who's in touch with her inner self. Besides, you work from home, it's perfect. And you know how much he loves his Aunt Janice." That was true. Aiden and I had always been close. When he was younger, he'd sit quietly next to me while I worked, drawing pictures or playing with his toys. But things were different now. I noticed small changes at first. He became more restless, more demanding of attention. Then he started screaming. The first time it happened, I was shocked. His face turned red, his little fists clenched, and he let out a scream so loud my neighbors probably thought I was murdering him. I tried everything: hugs, stern words, bribes with treats, nothing worked. He just kept screaming until he wore himself out. When Linda came to pick him up that evening, I tried to talk to her about it. "Linda, we need to talk about Aiden's behavior today. He had a massive meltdown. I've never seen him like this before." "That's just him expressing himself," she said, scrolling through her phone. "My online psychologist says it's healthy for children to release their emotions freely." As the months went by, I watched helplessly as my nephew's behavior became more and more concerning. Deep down, I knew this situation wasn't normal, it was far from it. Several times, I found myself with my finger hovering over the phone, about to call Child Protective Services. But every time, I stopped myself. The thought of Aiden being taken away from Linda, possibly put into the system, haunted me. I tried talking to my parents about it countless times. They lived just across town, and I thought surely they'd see what I was seeing. "Mom, Dad, something's seriously wrong with Aiden," I said during one of our Sunday dinners. "He's not just acting out, this is different." Mom just stirred her coffee, that dismissive look on her face that I was getting used to seeing. "Oh, honey, you're overreacting. Linda's going through a difficult time right now." "A difficult time? She's barely even there for him." I could feel my voice rising. "She dumps him with me whenever she feels like it, and he's getting worse." Dad jumped in then, his tone patronizing. "It's just a phase, Janice. Linda's dealing with her divorce crisis, and naturally, it's affecting Aiden. These things take time. Everything will settle down eventually, you'll see." "But Dad, you don't understand. Last week, he had a meltdown that lasted 3 hours. 3 hours. All children have tantrums," Mom said, waving her hand dismissively. "Remember how Linda used to throw fits when she was little? She turned out fine." I wanted to scream in frustration. This isn't the same thing. Linda's tantrums never involved destroying property or hurting people. But it was like talking to a wall. They'd made up their minds that this was just a temporary crisis, something that would resolve itself if we just waited long enough. They didn't have to deal with the reality of the situation, they weren't the ones living it. and living it was becoming increasingly difficult. When Aiden was with me, which was more and more frequent, my life turned into absolute chaos. Working from home became nearly impossible. I'd be in the middle of an important client call, and suddenly there'd be a crash from the other room. Once, during a video conference, Aiden appeared behind me and started screaming at the top of his lungs. My clients were understanding the first few times, but I could tell their patience was wearing thin. The final straw was when I started looking into getting a cat. I'd always wanted a pet, and I thought maybe it might even be good for Aiden to have an animal around. But then I remembered the time he'd grabbed my neighbor's dog's tail so hard the poor thing yelped, and how he'd laughed about it. The idea of leaving any animal alone with him when he was in one of his moods was terrifying. So I gave up on that dream too. My apartment underwent a complete transformation over time. Gone were the stylish open shelving units I'd loved so much. Instead, everything was locked away behind childproof cabinets. I'd replaced all my furniture with pieces that had no drawers or accessible storage. Anything that could be pulled out, opened, or climbed on had to go. My once trendy living space looked more like a minimum security prison than a home. Despite all these precautions, Aiden still found ways to create chaos. One particular incident stands out in my memory. It was the day I lost an entire week's worth of work. I was on a tight deadline for a crucial client project. Aiden had been unusually quiet that morning, which should have been my first warning sign. 20 minutes later, I got up to get a coffee. I was gone for maybe 2 minutes. When I came back, Aiden was standing there with a pair of scissors I still don't know where he found, and my computer cables were in pieces on the floor. My work computer, my backup drive, my tablet, everything was disconnected, the wires severed clean through. "Look, Aunt Janice. I made spaghetti," he said proudly, holding up the mangled cables. I just stood there, coffee cup slipping from my hand, staring at thousands of dollars of damaged equipment and a week's worth of work I couldn't access. I didn't even have the energy to be angry anymore. I just felt defeated. Linda's response when I told her? "Well, you should have been watching him more closely. The situation with his education wasn't any better." Since Linda had decided traditional schooling would suppress his creative spirit, Aiden was being homeschooled. I helped arrange for private teachers to come to my place several times a week since Linda was usually too busy with personal development to handle it herself. Miss Thompson was the first teacher. She gathered her things and left after Aiden had spent 30 minutes screaming because she'd asked him to count to 10. Mrs. Rodriguez was next. She specialized in working with challenging children and came highly recommended. She made it almost a month before quitting. Then came Mr. Parker, Ms. Chen, Mrs. Elliott, and finally, Ms. Andrews. Each one tried different approaches: games, songs, rewards, interactive activities. Nothing worked. Aiden would either explode into screaming fits that could last for hours, or he'd completely shut down, sitting in total silence, refusing to speak or even acknowledge anyone's presence. Ms. Andrews was the last to try. She had 20 years of experience in special education and seemed prepared for anything. But even she reached her limit after Aiden had one of his episodes where he went completely nonverbal in the middle of a lesson, only to suddenly snap out of it an hour later by throwing all his books out my second-story window. "He needs professional help," she told me quietly as she packed up her materials for the last time. "This isn't just behavioral issues. There's something deeper going on here." By the end of summer, I'd reached my limit. The constant stress of managing Aiden's outbursts while trying to maintain my work and sanity was wearing me down. I decided it was time for my parents to see firsthand what we were dealing with. Maybe then they'd finally understand and help me convince Linda to get professional help. "Mom," I said during one of our phone calls, "I need you and Dad to watch Aiden this weekend. I have an important deadline coming up." There was a pause on the line. "Oh, sweetie, this weekend isn't good. Your father and I have plans." "What about next weekend then?" "We're probably busy then too." This became a pattern. Every time I asked, they had some excuse. Too busy, not feeling well, having friends over, going out of town. It was like they had suddenly developed the world's most active social life. Finally, one Wednesday afternoon, I decided to force the issue. I picked Aiden up from one of his failed tutoring sessions and drove straight to their house. No warning, no call ahead, just showed up at their door, with Aiden in tow. I rang the doorbell. No answer. I could see their car in the driveway, and through the window, I caught a glimpse of movement, someone walking past quickly, ducking out of sight. Mom. Dad. I know you're in there. I called out, ringing the bell again. Aiden stood beside me, pulling at my sleeve and whining that he was bored. 5 minutes passed. 10. Their car was there, lights were on inside, but they simply refused to answer. I could hear muffled movements inside, but they just pretended they weren't home. I stood there, feeling like a fool, while my own parents hid from their grandson. This happened 3 more times over the next few months. Each time, the same result, they simply wouldn't answer the door. It became painfully clear that they were choosing to avoid the situation rather than help address it. As Christmas approached, I decided I needed a break. My friends had invited me to join them at a mountain cabin for the holidays, a whole week of skiing, hot cocoa, and adult conversation. It sounded like heaven. I told Linda about my plans in November. I won't be available to watch Aiden during Christmas week, I said firmly. I'm going to the mountains with friends. But you always watch him when I need you to, she protested. Not this time. I've had these plans for months, and I'm not changing them. I need this break, Linda. I repeated this message several times over the next few weeks. I sent her texts, emails, even marked it on the shared family calendar we used. December 24th to 31st, Janice out of town, mountain trip with friends. In the end, she easily agreed. I should have known better than to trust that easy agreement. I should have recognized the dismissive tone in her voice, the same tone she used when agreeing to look into therapy for Aiden, or when promising to be more present as a mother. But I wanted so badly to believe that just this once, she would respect my boundaries. Christmas Eve morning started like any other day. I was up early, packing the last few items for my mountain trip, double-checking my list to make sure I hadn't forgotten anything important. My suitcase stood by the door, ready to go. The sharp knock at my door came just before 8. I wasn't expecting anyone, except maybe that package I'd ordered, some last-minute Christmas gifts that were supposed to arrive today. Without checking through the peephole, I opened the door. There stood Aiden, backpack on his shoulders, clutching his favorite stuffed dinosaur. Behind him, I caught a glimpse of Linda's red SUV speeding away, tires crunching on the snow-covered street. I stood there, door still open, cold air rushing in, staring at my phone in disbelief. The fury built up inside me like a pressure cooker about to explode. After all the conversations, all the warnings, all the clearly stated boundaries, she'd still done this. Aunt Janice, Aiden said, pushing past me into the apartment, I'm hungry. My hands were shaking as I dialed my parents' number. Mom picked up on the third ring. Mom, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, Linda just dumped Aiden at my door and drove off. I'm supposed to be leaving for the mountains today. I told everyone about this trip months ago. Oh dear, she said, not sounding surprised at all. Well, that's unfortunate timing. Unfortunate timing? This isn't a coincidence, Mom. I'm bringing him to your house right now. Oh, we won't be home, honey. Your father and I are heading out to celebrate Christmas with the Hendersons in Cedar Rapids. Something in her voice sounded off. I'd heard her lie before, she had a slight uplift in her tone that I'd recognized since I was a kid. My stomach clenched. I pulled my laptop closer, opened Facebook, and went to my mother's profile. What I saw made my blood boil. There, posted just an hour ago, was a photo of my mother and Linda, standing in front of a beautifully decorated Christmas tree, my parents' Christmas tree, in their house. They were both smiling widely, wearing matching holiday sweaters. There were more photos. Linda helping set up decorations. Mom baking cookies. all timestamped within the last few hours. All clearly taken at their house, the house they claimed they were leaving to go to Cedar Rapids. I scrolled through the comments. "Can't wait to see everyone tonight," my cousin had written. "Save some of those famous Christmas cookies for me," posted one of Mom's friends. The whole family was going to be there, everyone except me. I stood in my living room, watching Aiden cry on the couch. Usually, his tears frustrated me, but today they gave me an idea. I looked at my packed suitcase, then at my nephew, and suddenly I knew exactly what I was going to do. "Hey, Aiden," I said, keeping my voice casual, "want to go on an adventure?" The crying stopped instantly. His head popped up, red-rimmed eyes suddenly alert and interested. This was one thing I'd learned about Aiden, he could switch emotions as quickly as flipping a light switch. "What kind of adventure?" he asked, sniffling but clearly intrigued. "A spy mission," I said, lowering my voice conspiratorially. "A super secret one. But you have to be really quiet. Can you do that?" He nodded eagerly, already slipping into character, his earlier distress completely forgotten. "I can be quiet like a mouse, Aunt Janice." "Perfect," I said, grabbing my suitcase. "Then let's go on a secret mission." I helped him put his coat back on and led him to my car. The whole way there, I briefed him on our spy mission. He sat in the back seat, giggling and whispering "secret mission" to himself over and over. As we approached my parents' house, I could see it was already in full holiday mode. Every window glowed with warm light, and I could hear Christmas music playing even from the street. Through the large front window, I caught glimpses of people moving around, laughing, enjoying themselves. The perfect family Christmas party, minus one family member, of course. I parked a little way down the street, out of direct view of the house. My hands were steady as I reached into my purse and pulled out my key ring. I'd had a key to their house since college, for emergencies, Mom had said. Well, this felt like an emergency of sorts. I reached into my trunk and pulled out a wrapped gift box, the present I'd originally bought for my parents. Now it would serve a different purpose. "Here's what you need to do," I said, handing Aiden the box. "You're going to sneak into the house, like a real spy. And then..." I paused, considering my next words carefully. Was I really going to do this? Was I really going to use my nephew's behavioral issues as a weapon? But then I remembered all the times they'd dismissed my concerns, all the times they'd left me to deal with the consequences alone, and how they'd conspired to ruin my holiday plans. And then, I continued, "You can do whatever you want. The whole house is yours to play in. No rules, no restrictions. Just like Mommy says, express yourself freely." Aiden's face lit up like I'd just told him Christmas had come early, which, in a way, it had. We crept up to the house together. The music was even louder now, Christmas carols competing with the sound of laughter and conversation inside. I put my key in the lock, turning it slowly, carefully. The door opened without a sound. I watched Aiden tiptoe into the house, his movements exaggerated like a cartoon character's. Then I quietly closed the door behind him. I was halfway to my car when I heard the first crash, followed by a chorus of startled screams. By the time I reached the driver's seat, the sounds of chaos were in full swing, breaking glass, more screams, and over it all, Aiden's distinctive high-pitched shriek of unrestrained joy. The mountain cabin was everything I'd hoped for. I spent a wonderful week skiing, drinking hot chocolate by the fireplace, and actually relaxing for the first time in months. My phone stayed off the entire time, tucked away in the bottom of my suitcase. When I finally returned home and logged into Facebook, I had several unread messages. The first one was from my cousin Sarah, who had been at my parents' Christmas party. "Janice, I don't even know where to begin," the message started. "That Christmas party was insane. As soon as Aiden got there, he burst in screaming 'Merry Christmas' at the top of his lungs. Before anyone could even react, he dove under the tree and started ripping open presents, everyone's presents, not just his. Then he just lost it. He was running around the living room like he was possessed, screaming and knocking things over. That beautiful Christmas dinner Aunt Carol spent 2 days preparing? All over the floor. The turkey actually slid off the table and landed right on Uncle Bob's new shoes. But that wasn't even the worst part. He started attacking the other kids, pinching them, biting them. Poor little Emma got bitten so hard she had teeth marks on her arm. And when the adults tried to stop him, he started grabbing their hair. Aunt Martha lost a whole chunk of her new hair extensions. Linda and your parents tried to catch him, but he was like a wild animal. Finally, Cousin Mike said what we were all thinking. He told Linda point blank that Aiden needs professional help, that this isn't normal behavior. Everyone agreed. Even Grandma, who never says a bad word about anyone, said Linda needs to wake up and get that child some real help. With a deep breath, I turned my phone back on. It immediately started buzzing with weeks of accumulated notifications. Over 100 missed calls. Dozens of voicemails. Hundreds of text messages. I started scrolling through them. How could you do this to us? Mom. You've ruined Christmas. Dad. This is all your fault. Linda. You've humiliated us in front of the whole family. Mom again. I waited until I knew Linda would be home from her latest spiritual retreat and called her. She picked up on the first ring. Listen carefully, I said before she could start yelling. I'm only going to say this once. You're going to get Aiden professional help, real help, not some online guru or spiritual advisor. You're going to take him to a child psychiatrist and a proper psychologist, and you're going to do it immediately. You can't tell me what to do with my child. Linda spluttered. Actually, I can. Because I have evidence, lots of it. I've installed security cameras in my apartment. I have hours of video showing Aiden's episodes. I even have him on video telling the story of how you abandoned him on my doorstep on Christmas Eve and drove away. I could hear her breathing change. You wouldn't. I would. If you don't get him help, I'll take all of this evidence to Child Protective Services myself. And then we'll see what happens to your custody rights and your alimony payments. After the Christmas incident, I cut off all direct communication with my family. I learned about their lives through other relatives now, like pieces of a story I was no longer part of but couldn't help following. Sarah became my main connection to the family news. She would text me updates, keeping me informed without pressuring me to respond or get involved. You won't believe this, she messaged me 2 weeks after Christmas. Linda actually took Aiden to a child psychiatrist. A real one, not some online guru. He's been diagnosed and everything. He's on proper medication now, and he's like a different child. Remember Emma, the one he bit at Christmas? They had a playdate yesterday. No incidents, no screaming, they just played normally with blocks for 2 hours. More updates trickled in over the following weeks. Aiden had started seeing a child psychologist regularly. His old teacher had agreed to work with him again, reporting steady progress in his ability to focus and interact appropriately. He was making friends, participating in group activities, using words instead of actions to express his feelings. Linda had changed too, according to Sarah. No more spiritual retreats, no more personal growth seminars. Instead, she was attending parenting classes and support groups for mothers of children with similar challenges. She'd even started volunteering at a local children's center, learning more about child development and behavioral therapy. Then, one quiet Sunday afternoon, my phone rang. Mom's name appeared on the screen. I let it ring 3 times while I debated whether to answer. Finally, I picked up. Janice, her voice was tentative, different from the angry messages she'd left after Christmas. I just wanted to let you know about Aiden. The therapy is really helping. His doctor says he's responding beautifully to the treatment. Linda's talking about enrolling him in regular school next year. Linda's different too. She's really stepped up as a mother. No more running away to find herself, she seems to have finally found herself right where she should have been all along, with her son. I felt tears prickling at the corners of my eyes. This was what I'd hoped for all along, what I'd fought for. But still, I couldn't help wondering about Linda's motivation. Was she really doing this out of love for Aiden? Or was she just afraid of losing custody and those alimony checks? I wanted to believe it was love, that somewhere beneath all the spiritual retreats and self-discovery workshops, she'd always loved her son. Maybe she'd just needed a wake-up call to remember what really mattered. I still don't know if what I did at Christmas was right. Using Aiden's challenges as a weapon, even against those who denied their existence, wasn't my proudest moment. But sometimes it takes a shock to break through denial, to force people to face reality. I hope, for Aiden's sake, that these changes last. Most of all, I hope that somewhere in this mess, we've all found a path to becoming a real family again, one that faces its problems together instead of pretending they don't exist.